All right, I'm Daniel Herson, and we're going to be learning some new activities. Let's just learn some new activities. And the first thing I want to point out is there are different types of poetry and storytelling activities. Some focus on what you're writing about. I'm writing about my shoe, I'm writing about New York City. Or I could tell kids how to write a poem. And I like to focus on the how because most kids are passionate about the what, so they can learn the how and still talk about the what that they particularly are passionate about. So let's see how this works out. Okay, I want to start with a quote from Cigman, who said, "Young children are constantly learning about all aspects of language, receptive and expressive. They are learning vocabulary and grammar, intonation and cadence." I really like this. And all of my activities are about high school students. So how do we help these younger readers? We're going to create a poem for them. We're going to literally write a poem, start to finish, as a class. They can break off to create individual stanzas, but together we're going to decide on the refrain and the theme of the entire poem. But that doesn't mean individual thoughts are going to be lost here. But we have to consider our audience. You always have to consider your audience. They're going to have a lower vocabulary. We're going to emphasize rhyming, and we're going to learn and help. My students are going to help teach these grammar, intonation, and cadence pieces. Fantastic. Let's move on. Okay. Bush suggested that, like any form of reading, poetry can introduce children to new words, and I suppose I could do the same thing and have, again, high schoolers teach new words to elementary, but high schoolers are learning new vocabulary too, and as someone who loves theater, why not have the terms be theater terms? Thrust is a verb for most people, but for us, it's a type of theater, it's a noun. The catwalk is not what most people think, but changing enough gels and focusing enough lights, I know what a catwalk is. And we have things like Upstage and Limelight, but they can tell any story they want as long as it's not about theater. That will help focus them into learning the terms and being free to tell any story they want. Moving on, Grisso makes a different type of point, saying storytelling provides a way into those difficult conversations and an opportunity to remind us of the common ground that we do share. Okay, so how do we talk about this kind of divergent understanding? Well, kids, they'll all have different experiences in life from different backgrounds. So I challenge them, and I will challenge them, to write a 100-word story or poem from their own lives. But the important thing is they need to write it as if the audience was a group of unknown teachers. Then they need to write it again as if it were for a group of peers. Between the two, there will be connections to people in your class. Maybe you have the similar experience, but the way when you switched during your code switching, maybe that was a little too confusing. But your peer can now relate to the story itself because they had a similar experience. All right, let's move on. So, Hurd brings up a bunch of ideas, but I want to kind of focus on one of her ideas, which is to cut apart a poem in order to learn about what a poem is similar to, and as repellent as, cutting open a frog to understand what a frog is. Which I think this speaks to the need for the right tool for the right job. So my activity is actually called The Wrong Tool. Using metaphorical scalpels, students are going to start cutting away, only cutting, no other edits, Some of Shakespeare's more problematic racist, sexist texts, you can look at the screen if you're looking for some examples. And they need to reverse and change the meaning. So perhaps Ophelia is the one that says, "I love you not," because we cut away the rest of those lines. Maybe Hamlet says, "I love you." Being able to switch the meaning requires three things. One, the students have to fully understand the original meaning. Two, they have to understand how to change it. And three, that if a tool can change the meaning so easily, it's probably not a good tool to create or to analyze. And that's particularly important when understanding things taken out of context, because that's going to change the meaning of a poem, that's going to change the meaning of a story, and we can get into news bias as well, but we don't have to, because this helps us become better listeners. We're not just looking for key phrases of understanding. When our fellow classmates are talking, we're looking for the entire thing to grab the meaning if we know that pulling out of context can lose meaning. This helps us so much. But let's move on to the last one. Yes, the last one. Don't worry. Barak says, while studying and writing, any poetry helps students develop literacy skills. Spoken word. Spoken word also helps students build social and emotional skill sets, including self-awareness, communication, and self-confidence. Maslow's hierarchy of need is what you see in front of you, and we need to kind of put these together. So slam poetry can be about anything, and it can be framed in any way. So I want it framed around a want, desire, or need. Again, I'm saying it will be a slam poem that you will perform for class, and frame it in terms of Maslow. I would show them and teach them this hierarchy. But I'm not telling them what the poem's actually about. All right. In conclusion, I hope you enjoyed this. I really hope you feel free to use and change these ideas for your classroom. Thank you very much.